therapy doesn't work? Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome everyone to Let's Talk About It podcast by SafeTalk, where we cover all things mental health that are rarely talked about. And in today's episode, we are going to be tackling a topic that might challenge some conventional wisdom about mental health, because we'll be exploring the question, what if therapy doesn't work? So joining me today is Miss Stephanie Chong. She is a mental health therapist and the founder of Fit Roots Therapy. Welcome, Miss Stephanie. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Fauza, for having me here. I'm doing good.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. And thank you. We've been chatting back and forth, and we finally have our episode session today, and I'm so excited to begin our topic. And of course, we're going to be heavily discussing on therapy,
Yeah.
but so you're now a licensed therapist, right? I think most people already know the idea of what therapy is, but I think I'd like to know the professional explanation on what therapy is for.
Okay. So when we talk about therapy in this sense, we're talking about talk therapy, right?
Mhm.
Also can be known as counseling or psychotherapy. And the traditional approach of therapy is to resolve or cure mental health illnesses,
Mhm.
right? But in the broader sense, mental health problems also include mental health illnesses and other mental health matters. And when I talk about mental illnesses, there are things such as illnesses that you require to be diagnosed. So in other words, mental illnesses refer to diagnosis such as social anxiety disorder, borderline personality disorder, so on and so forth. But there are still other mental health matters that do not warrant or require diagnosis, but still affect your mind and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, for example, let's say a person may be saying, I'm feeling really stressed lately, or I'm feeling really anxious lately, and I can't get along with my partner, my family member.
Yeah.
So, all of this may not fall under mental health illnesses, but they do fall under mental health matters or other mental health problems.
Yeah.
And let's talk about, let's say, relationship issues, like I have a conflict with my partner. I don't know where I'm in my family.
Yeah.
And these are relational problems. They are not mental health illnesses, but they do affect our mind, our well-being, and our mood.
Yeah.
So they affect us day to day.
So that is the general idea of therapy, right? And it's also the same, because we also kind of discussed this with our previous guest. They said therapy isn't necessarily just, like you said, just mental illness, but it can also be a form of a mental gym, like the same way you do with your physical health. You want to have a checkup, you go see a doctor, but it's also the same concept with your mental health, right? Even if you have just very small concerns according to you, but you still can refer that to a therapist.
Yeah. Of course. So therapy is quite flexible. People think that I need to have a big problem to go for therapy, but you don't.
Mm-hmm.
You can just come and have a talk. I want to try it out, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I agree. And I hear also people say that therapy only works if you actually want to work on your mental health. The same way people say, I can't help you unless you help yourself. Mm-hmm. So before I kind of get into the actual question, I want to know, is that statement true?
So it is true that it should come from ourselves to go for therapy instead of being asked or forced by others to go for that. And let me answer through a psychological lens. So there are 5 stages of change.
Okay.
So the first one is pre-contemplation, where the person is not ready for change. They don't think that there's even a problem.
Okay.
So they're in that stage. So contemplation is where I recognize I have a problem, but I'm also not ready to change it. Okay. So the pre-contemplation is that there's no acknowledgement there's a problem, and not ready to change. And contemplation is where I know there's a problem, but I'm not ready to change. Then there is the preparation, where the client, let's call it person, is getting ready to change. And then there's action, where they're actually changing their behavior. Then there's maintenance, where they try to maintain what they've learned throughout therapy.
Okay. Those are the five, right?
Yeah,
5
5
stages.
stages.
So if, let's say, like you said, I mean, it's important to be ready to work on your mental health, but if, let's say, someone is forced by their parents or by their partners and say like, oh, please go to therapy, I've already booked you an appointment, and I really need you to go there because we've been handling this issue and it isn't resolved yet. So do therapists know their way into easing their their client's process, or does it still require the person to be fully open to work on your mental health for that therapy to work?
Right. So to answer the second part would be therapy takes time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important for a therapist and client to have trust and rapport.
Yeah.
So that takes time as well. And as the therapy develops in the process, then that trust and rapport may be built between the client and the therapist. So the client may also change their feelings towards therapy. And if you have a skilled therapist, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you trust the therapist, the more open and honest you are, then the more that you can see progress.
Yeah.
And the more the person who's seeing the therapist may begin to think, okay, I think this is helping. I'm just gonna give it a go and try. Yeah. And like you say, it's true that I've heard a lot of children getting sent to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm also trained in family therapy and systemic therapy.
Yeah.
And I do hope to see more parents getting involved. Right? Like they'll say, oh, my child's a problem here, they're not doing well, but children are like manifestations and reflections of the family system.
Yeah.
So it's good that you send your children to therapy, you're helping them, but it's also important for parents and family members to recognize, to participate in it. Like, how am I contributing to this problem, or how can I help more?
Yeah.
So a lot of cases where parents have a lot of issues in themselves, but they're sending children to therapy instead. Mm-hmm. So it'd be good if the parents also participate with the children, or they go for their own personal therapy as well, and also do their own healing. Mm-hmm. Because as the parents heal, children will also heal. Right. So parents are just the mirrors of their parents. Mm-hmm. Did I say correct? Children are mirrors of parents. Yeah. So that's why I believe it's very important for parents to participate actively in the therapy process, not just for the children's healing, but also for your own healing.
So this would also be the same if, let's say, a partner too, right? Like if you think, oh, my boyfriend or my husband or my wife needs to go to therapy, then you could also do it for yourself, right? To be in a couple therapy or have your own therapy session. And I do remember also seeing like a YouTube video. He's a therapist, and he mentioned that he is like, all therapy is good, but personally for him as well, he likes to do this sort of systemic family therapy, because to him it's like, if you have an issue and you discuss it with your therapist and then you go home and then that issue, that problem is still there, like it's not resolved, but if you go in as a family, then you can see where the root is from. So I think that's a similar concept. And I also kind of want to know a bit more, like, why is it really important that the person is ready to work on their mental health?
Why is it important for a person ready? First of all, let me rephrase this question. I think a lot of people don't feel ready. Okay. Because it's really difficult to book a session and pay a stranger and say, I have a problem here, and it's going to
and I'm excited and
I'm scared, I'm nervous, it's really difficult for someone to, I think it takes a lot of courage even until today to seek help, right, with all the stigma and the barriers. So it is important, I would say, I think no one is ready, but when you do go for it, it is watch the process unfold. It's okay to be scared and be honest as you can with the therapist. You can tell a therapist that I'm feeling really scared now. I don't know what I'm doing here. I know how I'm feeling, but it's just how I feel. So the first thing we can do is just be honest with how we feel. Be honest that I don't feel ready, but I'm here. And why is it important? I'd say why is it important to actually start taking action for mental health? Because I firmly believe that mental health affects our physical health. Right. Mental health used to be like, it's just the mind, the physical part is separate, but a lot of research have proven that it's not. Like, I think for me, when I'm feeling really stressed, my stomach gets bloated easily, and that's when I can listen to my body and go, okay, my body's telling me that I'm feeling really overwhelmed, stressed. I need to take a break or do something about it.
Yeah.
So similarly, a lot of people complain that I'm having a lot of headaches, I can't sleep, or I get skin problems, I get psoriasis. So all of these are also linked to our mental health. Even our back pain as well. When we feel more stressed, there are people who are more prone to getting back pain and body aches. Because when you stress, you contract your body,
Your muscles strain.
correct, and then you're like, oh, I have back pain. So I heard a lot of complaints about that as well. So when if we can start seeing how important mental health is for our physical health as well, then it really changes the whole process and dynamic of mental health. It's not just for people with serious mental health illnesses.
Yeah.
It really is about everything.
Right.
Yeah.
It really depends. Kind of like you said, you're not going to be 100% ready when you get into therapy, but it all depends to how it goes in the beginning. Like maybe the therapist can ease you into like it's okay to talk about it, and like you said, it also, the moment that you see how it manifests it to your like physical body, it makes you feel like, oh my god, this is important to me and I need to work on it. Because like you said, people have different like body aches and symptoms. Like you had bloated, and then for me it's like having major hair loss, and I'm like, oh, I'm so stressed. But so that would be like a sign for you to be like, okay, I want to work on my mental health and physical health at the same time. So yeah, I think and we keep saying like, if therapy works, would therapy work? But what does that actually look like? What does someone feel like when they say, oh, therapy worked for me?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's still a general misconception about how therapy works. So some people think I go in therapy means like I want to make all my feelings disappear. I'm going to make this anxiety go away. That's my goal, right? Or make my problems disappear really fast. So a lot of people seek very quick ways to resolve it, to relieve on that of the symptoms, right? But those are short term.
Yeah.
So therapy is about long term. So when we look at long term, so therapy is for long-term effect, right? And when therapy works, it's when you are in the process and it's going to be uncomfortable. You will cry, you may awkwardness, your symptoms may become worse at first. Your relationship may change, and that's okay. But I think the ultimate outcome is when you realize that, for example, hey, I'm less reactive now. I am handling my emotions better, right? I'm sleeping better. I'm communicating better.
Yeah.
And I'm having better relationships with people now. So that's when therapy works. And it also depends on your goals. Like if you are going to therapy for a specific goal and you see that it's working out, that's when you know it is working. I think one of the most important part is when you feel less triggered by certain things, or by maybe like trauma. So traumatic people get a lot of triggers. So when you're able to handle that triggers better, then that's when they know that, okay, it's starting to work. Again, it's a process, so there may be up and down, but when you start to slowly shift in yourself, shift in your relationships, that's when you know that it's doing something for you.
It works. And I can say that for my own experience as well, because I also had that impression, okay, if I go into therapy or even if I just go to a psychiatry, after a few months, I'll be free. Like the major goal is to be happy, is to be happy and to be like at peace. And like, okay, I have no more problems anymore. But when I actually get into therapy, I'm like, okay, sometimes it can actually be harder because you kind of recall everything that you are, that you fear, that you dislike. And then the same points that you've mentioned is that now the way therapy works for me is not that I'm feeling happier. In a way it can be, but it's also how I manage my trigger. Like for example, before therapy, if there's a trigger, then I might fall into a very severe depressive episode for a whole month, for example. But now if something triggers me, I can manage it within like 2 days or like within half an hour. I'm like, okay, I know I have the skills now how to manage this because my therapist taught me. And I think that's kind of what people need to understand also about therapy. And one thing also my therapist said to me is that it's not about like positive emotions and negative emotion, because we have the thought that being happy is the ultimate, best emotion. But then other emotions also helps you protect yourself. It's just the way how you manage it during those moments that you're having a rough time and a good time.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, I'd like to add.
Yeah.
So instead, how do I know my therapy work is where there's this graph that is remembered. Which let's try to imagine. So the top part, I just call it hyperarousal.
Okay.
So hyperarousal is when it's for the anxieties, addiction, self-harming, when you're in overdrive.
Yeah.
Then in between is the window of tolerance, where we are able to tolerate and manage the difficult situation within our limit. Then below that it's hypoarousal, Hypo, hypoarousal. Okay. This way is opposite of hyperarousal. So hyperarousal is when you're numb, you feel dead, like everything is hopeless, everything is blue, I'm just gone.
Yeah, you feel disconnected.
Correct, disconnected, disengaged, I'm numb, nothing matters. So as long as, so let's say clients are in this, either one of this or two of the state, and if they're able to go into window of tolerance where I'm actually reducing my addiction, I'm no longer self-harming, or cutting myself, or having suicidal thoughts. I'm handling it better. I'm coping better with healthier ways.
Yeah.
That's when you know that, okay, therapy is working for you.
Right.
Yeah. Like you mentioned that it's not always about happy all the time. It's really about getting less triggered and handling yourself, being more resilient as well.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. It's basically kind of like a class for you to learn what's exactly and how to understand it. And it really makes my eyes open. Like, it's very different with like talking to a trusted friend. Of course, it's important with like talking to an actual therapist because they have the knowledge for you. And and now that we're kind of talking a bit more about therapists, and for the past like few episodes, we've been emphasizing on how important it is to find the right therapist, right? So are there any signs that a client might not be a good fit for their current therapist?
So this is specific to how the client feels. Most important, if you think your therapist is not practicing ethically, then they're not a good fit. And it's about that feeling, that rapport and trust. Do you trust your therapist? Do you feel safe with the therapist? If you don't, then that's a huge no-no. And perhaps discuss with your therapist, I don't feel this way with you, I'm not sure why. And I guess, I think generally it's but you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel safe, you don't feel like opening a therapist, or that therapist is forcing you to try a lot of methods and you told them it's not working, but they still insist that you should do it. Then they're not right fit.
But how do you communicate that with your therapist, like openly and honestly?
So I acknowledge that this is really difficult. Like it's difficult to tell someone that you're not working out, let's break up, right? So the best way, the most ideal way is, again, be honest. Again, start with how you feel about the therapy process and the methods, and say it's not working out because of what, and ask yourself as a client, what is it not working out? The methods, the way a therapist talk, or I just don't agree with what they say. And be honest and be curious about it. So the key is be honest and be curious what is not working. Have that really honest and honest conversation. Be clear with the therapist, like what's not working. And perhaps that therapist can use that feedback to improve on their ways. And if you feel like they are not improving, then ask for referral. Like, can you please refer me to a therapist? I think there's so many factors that may not be right fit. Could it be the training that the therapist like? Maybe you need a very specific issue that a specialist need to help on. Maybe you also need to complement with other healthcare providers. Maybe you need a psychiatrist as well. So it really also is on the therapist's evaluation. What is best for the client here?
So, and I think the next thing that is kind of like scary too, it's not just about communicating, but then it's like, I feel bad for the therapist. Like, I feel guilty, like I've been opening up and I've been having like a few sessions by now. Like, what if the therapy dislikes me, or what if I hurt their feelings? So maybe like you as a therapist, you could share like your thought process is like if a client comes to you and say this isn't working. So maybe that could kind of comfort others who also feel guilty for changing therapists.
Yeah. So therapists are also humans.
Yeah.
And I agree that it's scary to tell a therapist that it's not working. And it's also a therapist's fear that I'm not a good therapist, it's not working my part. It's also scary for them.
Okay.
But in a way, we are trained to take in feedback and also constructive criticism. Because without clients' feedback, we can never improve. Like therapists as humans need to keep learning as well.
Yeah.
And I think when you're able to tell your therapist that this is not working, it's also a good interpersonal therapy or interpersonal training for the client. Because if you're able to be honest with therapists, then that makes it easier to be honest with other people in your personal life. Like, it's quite common for clients to sometimes ghost therapists, and they're like, oh, I'm just gone, without a word. I think all therapists experience that.
Okay.
And I think ideally, don't go to a therapist. Again, try to be honest with your feeling. Like, I starting to feel that I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
I've lost track of my goals. Everything we've done is not really working to my expectations or our expectations. But I'm also really scared of hurting your feelings as a therapist, because I care for your feelings as well. But I also think that's not working.
Yeah.
So how can we work about this? So again, starting with your feelings, tell your fears to the therapist, and most likely they're going to take it well. They're going to respond okay because they're trained to do it. And if they don't respond or react well, then it's not on the client. It's really on the therapist.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So just starting with your fear, the very honest fear, like I'm really scared to tell you.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's because I do believe that in the therapy room, how the client acts, talks, behave reflects their personal life. So if the client is not giving feedback, I don't know how you're doing, or they go to therapist, then it kind of reflects how you are with other people in your personal life. So that may come across as avoidant or being uncomfortable to talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
So take it as like me telling my therapist, me being honest with my therapist as a training for me to be better in my relationship. So even if that therapy process doesn't work, but when I tell my therapist about my honest feelings, I'm sort of like doing therapy myself. Like, yes, if my therapist can handle it, then so can others.
Like the courage.
Correct. Like I got it in my therapist, so now I have more courage to do it with other people. And this is a really important relationship, conflict resolution, relationship in our family, relationship with our partners, our colleague, co-workers.
Wow. I'm like being personal. Okay, I feel like that's my I also need to hear that advice as well, because I think the fear of communicating, it's also kind of a a reflection of like your fear. Like, let's say if you do the same with other people, like your parents, for example, or your family, I know how they're going to react. They're not going to like what I'm going to say. So maybe that's the same thing with like, I have to be personal and I have to be honest with my therapist, and I don't know how this person is going to react. But now we know that it's a normal part of therapy. Like, some clients really just don't fit well with the therapist, and it's okay to, like, ultimately it's your choice, right? It's your choice and it's your money to put in where you think is best for you. So what can someone do if they feel like they're not making progress in therapy at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I understand that people pay a lot for therapy, so they want to make sure that it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing to check, ideally the beginning of the therapy, right, in the first few sessions, is to check the goals and knowing expectation. Like, as a client, how many sessions do you think you need to reach this goal, to resolve your problems or concerns? And if you think 2 or 3 sessions is enough, then maybe that's not that realistic, depending on your goals again. If you want long term, then you may need more. If it's short term, then maybe you need lesser. But again, do discuss with therapists and see what the answer therapists give.
Yeah.
There's even research that shows that 10 sessions may not be enough for any long-lasting significant change.
Okay.
Some say that I need more than 10, maybe 20. Some say like, oh, you need at least 6. So when you say it's not, when you say you're not making progress as the client, like what is not progressing here? Like is it because of your expectations, or because like I still feel the same?
Yeah.
After how many sessions? Again, how many sessions you think you need to see progress? So again, it's the client's expectation, and does the therapist convey that expectation to you?
And so that's the two things. Like one is to know like when you ask this question, if you ask like, oh, it's not working, but it's only been like 4 sessions, so you kind of have to put more time into it, right? And like you said as well, like it depends for the clients, and 6-10 sessions is not enough. Like some people go for therapy for years, right, to kind of work on with it. And another thing is like, even if you had gone that therapy for so long, you can always communicate that with your therapist, right? And say like, I don't really feel any much changes, or I don't feel comfortable with, you know, how little progress I have right now, right? And so yeah, kind of also like with therapy, right? Therapy can be expensive, and not only expensive, it's also a form of privilege, because even if you can afford therapy, sometimes maybe you don't have direct access to it, your location wise, or whatever that is blocking you to go to therapy. So what resources might be available for people who want therapy but can't afford it at the moment?
So I would say the best resources in Malaysia would be to see trainee therapists, because they're relatively cheaper, and they have clinical supervision.
Right.
So they're cheaper, and they're also backed up by other professional licensed registered therapists.
Yeah.
That's a good resource.
So that's a good.
And you can also do research as well on the supervisor, like what practice they do, their experience.
Because I notice, because with therapy, sometimes people go with like, oh, online therapy, not like with actual therapists, but kind of just online support where people support. I think that's really good when you're kind of in crisis and you really needed help like at that moment. But I think in long term, if you want to work on something, that's definitely a great option to just look for someone who has a professional background, or like you said, is backed up by someone who is also professional. And coming back to, you know, having that impression of therapy just being a one-time thing, I'm also curious to know how common it is for people to come back to therapy.
Again, this really depends. Like even on the question where what I'm not making progress in therapy, aside from number of sessions expectation, it's how frequent you go. If you just started and you go like, I'm just gonna go once a month, then it's hard to see progress. So the ideal frequency would be at least once a week, or once every 2 weeks, depending on again the issue, the goals, the seriousness, again to be discussed with the therapist. So it's very individualized. So there are some people where I have this specific goal, I'm just going to be here for this goal, whether it's stress management or time management, have better relationship with my partner, better relationship with my family, or resolve things like grief, anxiety, depression. And so some of these clients, they will just go a few sessions for this, and once they feel like I reached my goal and now I want to terminate. So termination is also an important process where you close off this chapter of therapy, this journey with your therapist, and basically summarize what you have learned. How can you consolidate it and apply it to your life? So it's like a nice close off. And there are some clients where, okay, I reached my goal, but I don't want to terminate yet. I'll just like come whenever I need to. As I need to. So it's also up to the client, whatever makes you feel better and more comfortable.
Oh, so that's also an option. Okay. And and like you said, it depends on what you work on, because I also talked to therapists, like, because previously I had like 2 therapists, and she said like it depends, you know, you can work on this thing with that therapist, and I think the best is to just focus on one therapist, but you can just work on different things with therapists. And I think that's might also be kind of the reason why people would come back and like, I've resolved this, and maybe there's a new thing that comes up, like, oh, I just broke up with my partner and I want this to be resolved as well. So then you can come in for therapy, right?
Yes.
So it depends on your issues, problems, and if you want it.
Yes.
Yeah. And a while ago, I also watched a video where a therapist shared this book. It's called Real Love by Greg Bear, which also which explains a lot about relationships and unconditional love. And in the book, the author shares about, you know, his personal story and other people's stories. And I remember one of the things that he mentioned is that they've tried therapy, but it just doesn't work for them. And to me, it's like, it's kind of scary when I read these things, like, oh, why do people try therapy and try everything? Oh, it just doesn't work for me. So I kind of have this question, like, does therapy really just not work for some people, or are there more factors that lead to that conclusion, like consistency, environment, expectations? Yeah.
I think this really depends on the individual. It's like, I only know where I try. And it's true that not everyone might benefit from therapy. Not everyone is ready for therapy. Not everyone would think that therapy is suitable, and that's okay.
Okay.
So it's really about trying and staying in the process and really deciding and noticing for yourself what's changing and what's not changing.
Yeah. So it really depends, basically. And even with like therapy, I had friends where she kind of constantly reached out for professional help, right? But previously it just doesn't work for her. But when she finally get into what you call private sector, private mental health centers, and getting the right help that she needs, then finally therapy works for her. So yeah, like you said, it's also a form of like trial and error.
Yeah, I'd like to add also that when people say therapy is not working, is it expectation? Is it because it's so uncomfortable that I'm not improving? You know, like I'm expecting to feel better after 1 session, 2, 3 sessions.
Yeah.
I think it's also on the therapist to also inform the client on expectation. Look, you may feel worse after this, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You may feel worse after session, that's okay as well. You may not see improvement for a while, but you should notice there will be changes in how you see things, how you feel for things, how you communicate people. So again, it's a process of really reflecting on yourself. Yeah. It's a process of self-reflection. Yeah. Like I said, is it frequency? Is it expectation? Yeah. And because as a therapist, I believe it's important for therapists to seek help as well, to also check on our mental health. So I've been in therapy. And I think when I was still seeing my clinical supervisor, he recommended me to go for therapy, and I said, okay, sure, just give me recommendations. Yeah. And then he said, Steph, I noticed that you tend to not stay the same therapist. So for this time, can you please try to stay? And I'm like, okay, sure. So I stayed and it worked. So instead, I just like, okay, it's not working anymore. So I just stayed and really trusted the process. It was not easy. I cried as well. You know, I would do a lot of work because I think to be a good therapist, you need to be stable. Like, it's not to say that you don't have problems. Like, we have problems, but we need to be aware of that and learn how to resolve it and manage our issues. Yeah. And so you become a better person, you become a better therapist. And when you see client, you're not like, oh my God, like I can relate to you, you know, like, oh my God, like, you know, I'm not in that. I'm more stable as a person when I also seek help. Yeah.
And having that boundary, right? Like your personal mental health and that client's mental health. Because I always I always admire like how therapists can do that, you know, like having to not only work on clients' mental health, but also to manage your own mental health. Because I also see a lot of like social media posts where therapists are even open about their own mental health, saying that, you know, even though I'm a therapist, I also have my own struggles, you know, I also have needs that I need to meet. And I think that's realistic, like for most people. And it's like therapist is not like the perfect, or just because you're a therapist or a psychology major that I know everything and I'm able, like I'm the superhero. So like you said, right, like there's different factors to it, and depending on how consistent you are. And the point that you mentioned is don't quit too early, right? Like don't like, oh okay, this is not working, I don't like it and I'm not comfortable with it, so I don't want it. Because even I didn't think that this is common, because even when I was in therapy, I was like, after 2 weeks in, like at first I was like, oh, this is fun. But then when the thing hits, like, oh my God, this is the most horrible thing, because I have to face all the fears that I had. But yeah, I think that's the thing, that people need to be more patient in their therapy
Of course,
process.
Again, communicate that with the therapist and give the therapist time to change or adjust their approach.
Yeah.
And if you think that still the same, they are not taking my feedback well, then you are free to ask for referral, to refer me to someone else, or you can find another therapist.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
And some people fear therapy, kind of like we mentioned before about communicating on, oh, this isn't right for me. But at the same time, people just starting therapy also is scared of communicating their emotions and their problems, because they don't know how to describe their struggle. So how do therapists usually manage or help clients like this?
Oh, so that's a good question, because sometimes even for us, right, even therapists, I'm sure even yourself, when we just feel overwhelmed, we ask ourselves, how do I feel now? Like, sometimes we're like, I don't know. I don't know, because like there's too many things I really don't know. And one easy way that therapists can do is to look at the emotion wheel for the client. It's a thing called emotion wheel, where there's like major emotions from anger to sadness, fear. And if you break it down further, there are more specific emotions, like feeling, let's say, resentful, jealous. It's coming from anger. So you get to name that. And my favorite approach, I think for my approach, is I use a lot of somatic integrated talk therapy. Where instead of asking client, so how do you feel now? I'm more like, where in your body do you feel this sadness, this this sensation? You said you don't know how you feel, but is it because I don't want to know, or I really don't know, or because I don't know because I don't want to know, and there's still too much, right? And I would ask how they feel inside themselves, like from the top of your head to your toe. What are you feeling now? Maybe even your chest. Like, because a knot in your stomach. Like, we may not know how we feel in our mind cognitively, but we can feel what we feel in our body, like through our sensations. So I think this goes back to when therapy is not working for me, right? Is it a family issue or relationship issue? And I'm saying this because I think a lot of therapists still practice a lot of, like this CBT is very common, it's good, but it's also very cognitive part. So when you say I family issue, is it because I need someone who is more skilled in relationship issues, like someone who can see couples, or someone who can deal with family dynamics, relationship issues? So that's also important as well. And then, like you said, you can see more than one therapist if you need. You can see a couple therapists or family therapists, and you can see your own individual therapist.
So basically, like, if you're so overwhelmed with every emotions and struggles that, like, you can't even pinpoint exactly one, like, you don't have to worry about that, right? You can just come into the therapy session, and your therapist will help guide you on what is most important for you. So you don't have to, like, I don't know, so I don't want to go. So it's like, you can still work about like that. You can still work on that with your therapist. And speaking of fear, it's not just about describing your problems, even just not manifesting, even just showing, and like the idea of crying or showing any emotions to another person feels embarrassing and awkward. Like, how can someone overcome this sort of fear as well?
So it's very normal to feel scared and nervous and awkward with a therapist. Like, you might go, I don't want to cry, I'm going to cry today, and then you might just cry, and that's really okay. And if you do cry, notice how it feels, and ask yourself, as I'm crying here, why am I feeling awkward or embarrassed? And again, tell a therapist, whatever's pouring out it's like just that, take it as a space.
Yeah.
Say, I feel it awkward now. I don't want to cry here, but I'm crying.
Yeah.
And I think a good therapist will be able to see that, okay, client is not feeling comfortable. Why? Is it because you were never allowed to express yourself growing up? So crying becomes such an uncomfortable expression of an emotion.
Yeah.
And just bear in mind that it's okay. It's going to be okay. And as long as I'm honest, and as long as I can say what I feel, it's going to be okay.
And to understand that in a therapy session, that's your safe space, right? You're not going to be judged there. And also speaking of judge, someone might go into therapy, like consider therapy, but it's like, but my problem is like too small. Like there's no way my therapist would care about it, or like my therapist would think like, I'm weird for it, and they might judge or feel like this is so boring. Like, why am I talking about this? So, how do you kind of like overcome that as well? Like the thought of this is not important.
It's a very common thought.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would wait until the problems become quite serious, only they need to seek for help.
Yeah.
I would recommend to seek for help as early as you can. And for me, I wish I did. I wish I did it earlier when I was younger, but I didn't. So no problem is too small. For me, no problem is too small. Every problem is unique.
Yeah.
And when I say it's non-judgmental, it really is non-judgmental. Like a lot of people come in and say, oh, I don't like myself. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be hurt again. And my question would be, why would you not be angry? Like, why would you not be hurt? Why would you not be traumatized?
Yeah.
Like, so much has happened for you.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not easy to bring it up, to a stranger, to a therapist, to just say this. So when I ask myself, why would you not be angry? Why would the client not be anxious?
Yeah.
It really changes the whole lens and dynamic with my client.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a lot more compassionate and respect and love for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the healing, the trust, the rapport, it just flows naturally for me and my client.
Yeah, I like that question because I think most of the time it's more of like individual thing. Like in our heads, we think this is not important. Oh, I should just be grateful. Like people have it worse, or they're like comparing me to other people. Like this is okay. Why am I complaining? But actually, when you go into therapy, you'll be able to see that it is valid. There is the reason why you're acting this way. There is a valid explanation as to why you're reacting this way, because it is in fact important to you, and the fact that you're thinking about it is already a sign that it's really important, and like already a sign that your mental health needs help. And I think people need to kind of be more kind to themselves when they're starting therapy.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's very common that people rationalize like, oh, just a small problem. Oh, I should be grateful. And I think we get it a lot from other people as well. Like, you should be grateful. You should cheer up. Be okay. And this is what friends and family may tell you. But obviously, it doesn't really work as well. It's not as effective.
Yeah.
So a therapist there is to really hold that space for you and work through things with you, see things in the bigger picture for you, experiment new methods with you, and see what works for you.
Yeah.
Because each of us is unique.
Yeah. Because logically, if you should be grateful, or if it's nothing, then you shouldn't have that reaction in yourself. Like, so that is already like a good reason why therapy is okay to go.
Yeah.
And
that's true. I think
It's
this is also why I come from an integrative approach, where like logically, it's always like, I should be grateful, I should be happy, but your body doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't be anxious, but your body doesn't feel safe enough. So there's that disparity there. So which is why I always ask clients, how do you feel in your body now? Because I think we are so used to telling things off our mind that we lose touch with our body and how we feel. And if we are able to really pay attention to what goes on in your body, it really tells you a lot of things. It's like slowing yourself down. It's part of mindfulness. So mindfulness is not about turning on some nice meditation music, meditate there, with your hands folded. That's not mindfulness. I mean, that's also mindfulness, but a more practical approach should be pay attention to your body.
Yeah.
The logical part may say one thing, but there's another part in you that says, no, I don't feel that way.
Mm.
And that's when therapy can help you to really listen to these parts and know what you want.
That's why like all therapists, like in our previous episodes as well, all therapists will say that it's always important to acknowledge what you're feeling. And this is also the first time we kind of really discuss about how important to hear what our body is saying as well. Like even just something as simple as like me going to TikTok and then I see this like mother, I think, and she has like a small business like doing cake bakery and she enjoys it, but after a while it was so exhausting for her and it started to manifest like physically, emotionally, mentally, and and I think that's one of the examples where mental health doesn't just limit what you think, but you can also, if you look closely enough, you can also notice it in your body as well.
Yeah, and this is why I named my practice Fit Roots.
Okay.
Because like we know about physical fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Like people go Pilates class, workout gym, have a nice body.
Yeah.
But how often do we talk about mental fitness? Like the parts of our mind, our brain, or like the word roots is about going back to the roots of your issues. Like again, people like to seek for quick relief.
Yep.
So this is why addiction comes, self-harm comes, because we want to relieve pain. And the society tends to view this thing as bad.
Yeah.
But I see it more as like a coping way to relieve pain because nobody wants to have pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And therapy is again being mentally fit and going back to the roots of your issues.
Yeah.
So it's about long term, it's about being mentally healthy, not just bodily healthy.
And yeah, even like bodily healthy and addiction, that you now that you mentioned that, even people are pointing out now that sometimes even I'm having a problem, now I have to go to the gym. Like the excessive working out is also like it's also what do you call, like a form of addiction, right? And an unhealthy coping mechanism, because you feel like this is what can work out for me and like I can distract myself. But that is where mental health is also important, because physical health doesn't just fix everything. Correct. Because you're overworking yourself.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add how therapy works. Like we talk a lot about process, right? But let me talk about the science of the brain.
Okay.
So let's say, so we have a prefrontal cortex, where it regulates our thinking, emotion. Then behind the prefrontal cortex, there's a limbic system of the brain, where there's the amygdala, a very small, tiny thing in the brain. And let's just call amygdala the alarm system.
Okay.
So I think a lot of us, when we get triggered and we start reacting, oh my god, no, I go in overdrive, then the addiction comes about, or the self-harming, or even overthinking, the anxiety. This is because your body detected danger, it sent a signal to your brain. Yeah. And the amygdala is the alarm system, so it started ringing. You imagine the fire alarm start ringing. Yeah. And when your amygdala is triggered and it starts, imagine it's ringing, it's activated, the prefrontal cortex shut down. Like the regulation of thoughts, emotions shut down, because your brain is like, I need to survive. I have no time to think about what's going on. Yeah. So, and then the hippocampus part of the brain is to process memory. That is also shutting down. Okay. So when the alarm system goes off, everything's like, oh my god, I'm triggered again, I'm traumatized. So again, therapy is really about working the prefrontal cortex, which is why I always ask clients, as you talk about this now, as you talk about what happened then, how are you feeling now in this moment? Like I see that you're fidgety, and so what's going on inside now? Like let's get about now, because for example, in traumatic and clients who experience trauma, a lot of things that happened in the past feels like it's happening now. So when I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about the here, the present. Let's try to stay with this present. Yeah. Because when we can increase our tolerance for, let's say, triggers, and we can really stay in our body, that will increase our resilience naturally. Because your prefrontal, when I ask you like how are you feeling your body now, you are working your prefrontal cortex. Okay. Then amygdala start to reduce the ringing, the activation. And that's when you are beginning to heal. You're beginning to notice that, okay, like there's no threat now. It's just a past memory or a symptom that I'm having.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that. So that's the science behind the why we feel sometimes so reactive.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now I understand now. That is why, because I also didn't really understand. Because my therapist also say like, okay, present is important. Like, I know like it's so important whatever that you've gone through in the past, but the present is also important. Like work on what is going on now. Now that you have the scientific explanation, it really makes sense.
Yeah.
Because so correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, if you're stuck in the past, you're kind of bringing that amygdala, right?
Yeah.
So then your body is like panicking and trying to survive,
Correct.
even though
Flight,
yeah,
you know.
even though you're not actually going through it right now.
Mm.
So if you're kind of focusing on something that matters more in the present, you change the brain function to what's the prefrontal cortex.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
When it's activated amygdala, then it's just shut down. Because again, it's a body. Like I think we used to face lots of threats, right? And our ancestors, tigers, bears. So everything that our body does is to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes to overdrive. Like in our modern world, it's not that practical to keep ourselves alive all the time because we're actually technically safe.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I hope.
Yeah.
Then this is why I like to use I like to really get my clients to keep in touch with the now in their body because it's hard to say, how do I feel now? I don't know, like it's a lot of things because your body is like not safe. It's like, oh my God, I don't know where I am, I'm disconnected. So when clients can start to connect, I notice my hands are tingling. Let's be curious about that.
Yeah.
So it's about staying in the moment and be curious with yourself. That's where the healing, that questions, the questions that you have, the doubts will start to make sense to you.
Wow. I really like that explanation. Thank you for that. Okay. This is actually also something that we haven't discussed yet in our podcast. Is about privacy and confidentiality. Will therapists reveal to others about your personal information, your personal details and issues?
No.
Okay.
Again, I'll say that. So let me start by reframing my answer.
Yeah.
So we go therapy, it's all private and confidential. Meaning your name, your issues cannot or will not be disclosed unless the client gives consent.
Yeah.
Unless they sign a consent, you can use my information, that's fine. But if they don't, then you cannot reveal. For trainee therapists, they need to discuss the cases with their supervisors. So that's the only exception that your details, your issues will be revealed, but only to the supervisor.
Yeah.
And no one else can know about that. And the supervisor have to know because they're training the therapist, and that's why they need to know the details.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's all P and C. Like a good ethical therapist is not going to go out and
gossip with other people.
No, we don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But if you find out their therapist may have done that, then please bring it up.
Okay.
And if you feel like they breached that privacy confidentiality part, then you have a right to make a complaint.
Okay. Yeah. And the part where you say about like talking with supervisor, right? Because based on my experience as well, my therapist sometimes would inform me that, okay, I might discuss your case with my supervisor or other therapists in the same center without disclosing my name and information, of course. So is that like a common practice among therapists, and is it something people should be worried about?
So it is true. Therapists do talk about their clients' cases with their peers. We call it peer supervision. Right? Even in classroom as well, we talk, but we don't review the names at all. It's about presenting issue. This client's having this. Then it happened.
Yeah.
Another part of supervision is clinical supervision, where they have a more experienced licensed therapist who is also a supervisor, who is guiding the younger or the less experienced therapist.
Yeah.
And clients do not have to worry about this because we don't reveal names.
Yeah.
But it's also on the therapist to tell the clients that I do talk about our case in supervision, but I don't reveal your name. And check with them, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? Then that should be good.
So that's why my therapists were also like communicating that I discussed this. But generally, like therapists wouldn't just, like we said, like gossiping or just reveal your information with others, because you also sign, right, before you start the therapy.
Yeah. Let me say why supervision is important, because I think therapists are also humans. We all have blind spots, like the clients, so there may things that we don't see in the client.
Yeah.
And so we bring it up when we feel like, I feel stuck in this. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of us start to discuss about this case, and it really brings up a lot of valuable input. For example, another therapist might add, oh, do you check the client how is conflict expressed in their family?
Yeah.
Then the therapist who's seeing the client might go, oh yeah, I didn't actually ask. Maybe I should ask in the next session. So it gives input.
That actually helps in your therapy process.
Yeah, and that makes the whole process more objective, because you have other therapists analyzing it as well from a psychological therapy lens. And with a clinical supervisor, so even for me as well, I do see a more experienced supervisor to make sure that, okay, I'm learning, I'm growing as a therapist, and it makes sure that I keep my work improving.
Yeah. Oh, that's I think, because we haven't discussed it, so it's really important for people to know that it's okay and it's always safe to be with your therapist and to talk about it. And is there, and before we sort of end this episode, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about what to do if they feel like therapy isn't working for them?
So in summary, always communicate, be honest. Okay, be honest, and try not to ghost your therapist. If they ask you, hey, are you coming? And then don't ghost them. Be honest what is not working. If you feel like it's not working, be honest with what's not working. This gives a chance for therapists to really improve and take note of the feedback. Because after all, we are human. Therapists are humans. We are looking for ways to improve. And we have to improve and grow. And also give feedback on what was effective, so that a therapist can, implement more in the sessions with you. So what's not working and what's working as well. It's also good. And ask questions to therapists. You're allowed to be curious. Be curious about the process, and just ask yourself and the therapist questions. And again, go with the flow. And again, reflect and assess. How was I before I started therapy, and how am I now, and how am I after therapy? What changed, what did not, what can be improved? Then bring up the therapist. And I would suggest to also bring a notebook to therapy, because I think a lot of us, we just tend to forget, like, what happened in last session? I don't really remember anymore what the therapist said. Something along the lines of this. So you can bring a notebook during, or if you feel you don't want to get distracted, write a note as fast as possible after the session, so that I can remember what happened. Then let me implement it in my life now, before the next session. And again, check with your goals. Am I reaching towards it, or am I not reaching towards it? Do I need to change my goals? And also perhaps check if you think it's a relationship issue that you think your therapist is not working on well. Then check, do you need a therapist who can practice a more systemic relationship kind of approach? Do you need to see a couples therapy if it's a relationship with a partner, or family? That's
amazing advice. And the one that you said about checking back, like where you started and where you are now, because another therapist also mentioned about this, that sometimes we feel like I'm not doing the best I could, but when you look back from where you started, like, oh, I've actually improved a lot. It's you have to check back yourself and ultimately just communicate with your therapist. I think that's an amazing advice, and I really enjoyed this episode. It's a very eye-opening episode, especially the part where you explain the scientific aspect of our brain, and also understanding the importance of finding the right therapist fit, and not just the right therapist, but also the kind of therapist, like is it individual, couples, or family therapists, because it kind of empowers people to to take control of their own mental health journey. It's like you have the choices, so you can make it based on what is best for you. So huge thank you to Ms. Stephanie for providing such a hopeful perspective on our topic today. Thank you so much.
I'd like to also add, maybe this is my observation. So I've heard a lot of people who would take medications first. Like, I think it's not wrong to take medication, but I do believe it's also important to complement it with talk therapy.
Yeah.
Medication talk therapy, and really see the improvement. So yeah, that's my take. And also the last word is, I think this goes back to when I say how I use bodily oriented approach in my talk therapy, somatic approaches. This because this comes from a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and I always remember this phrase: the body keeps the score.
Okay.
Where the body stores the trauma, the memories, the symptoms, and things like that.
Okay.
So I would say for those who are interested to start therapy, maybe you can try to read the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
Okay.
It's a good book.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So that book that's where you can start learning about.
I think I'm not wrong, but it's nice. It's a good way to understand how difficult situation and trauma affects us.
And I like the reminder about the psychiatry, to have both balance of like medication and also therapy, because even my friend who is on medication, she also highlights that it's really important to have therapy, because medication, although it helps kind of with her, because she has ADHD, with her emotions and functions, her functionality on a day-to-day basis, but therapy also helps in her managing, like having skills to manage. So I think that's the best way, because even I thought like, psychiatry will help, resolve everything, but it's finding the balance and trying out different professionals. Yeah. So I think that's very insightful, and for those interested in learning more about Miss Stephanie's work, you can find her website and social media in the description. So I will link all your services and your profile in the description. And if you're interested and if you enjoy our episode, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our social media accounts. We're also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to be an audio listener, you can go there, check us out over there. But I think that is all. Thank you so much. Thank you. So that's all. Until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.